We just watched the penultimate episode of Season 2 of X-Men 97, and I got some questions. We're going to talk about everything that happened in the episode, recap all of it. Also, my cat Mortimer is now climbing around my lap. He loves Gambit because Gambit has 3 cats named after Disney cats, I believe. It would be Lucifer, Figaro, and Oliver, which people pointed out, and I think this is fair. He named them all after cats from Disney movies, except none of them look like the cat from the Disney movie they're named after. In fact, you could switch all of them and it would make a lot more sense because like the orange one isn't named Oliver. Anyway, it's fine. But we got to talk about episode 8, The Dead Man's Hand. I think overall what this episode is doing is fun. I'm going to say something that's probably somewhat controversial. While I am enough of a fan of Gambit from the show, from the comics, I was okay with him being dead. And more importantly than that, I was okay with him staying dead. Like I thought at the beginning of this season, Apocalypse would try to resurrect Gambit. It would work. Gampocalypse. I mean, I guess he wouldn't have been Gampocalypse originally, but like now that's what I'd say he is. But then they would have to kill him and fight him again in the finale, and they wouldn't get him back. And it would be Rogue's way of like dealing with the fact that he is dead, because Rogue's already sad about it, but Rogue kind of has to move on, because in any other kind of story, that's the lesson here. The problem is the X-Men don't necessarily have to move on. They can kind of reliably go, well, it's okay, because he'll come back to life eventually. It's one of the things I thought was so funny about my favorite X-Men comics run, X Factor Investigations. Through it, Siren's dad, Banshee, is dead, and Siren keeps going, that's alright, he's gonna get resurrected or something. And everybody in the book treats her like it's kind of silly and delusional, but in reality, it's like, no, he will. That is how this goes. Also, like I've said in the last couple of videos, I want to point out cool artists that I find on Twitter. This background is by Haruch1. HARU_CH1. They've made a lot of cool ones. I don't know if they've ever been in a video before, but I was okay with Gambit being dead. I honestly thought that was kind of a cool move for the show to make, because he was such a popular character. Now, to be fair, he still could die in episode 8, but the idea that not only is he brought back to life via Apocalypse and death, but then by the end of this episode, it seems like he's kind of maybe cured, or at least he is in control of the body now and the body is back to its normal colors. I'm okay with, but I'm not incredibly compelled by. Partially because one of the things I like about the X-Men, and one of the things I think is fun about this team, is a character dies, and then they all kind of move on. And a lot of times that character does come back from the dead. But like, for instance, last week, Peter and Illyana, their relationship in the comics was very much defined by the fact that she died, and he, in his grief, went and joined up with Magneto. And then over time, you had to learn from that. I don't think Rogue has had that time this season. I think there have been moments when she's been sad, but I honestly can't remember more than a couple of lines she has had this season. Like, Rogue got a fair amount to say in her 2 flashback episodes. But then when we came to the present, episode 5, I don't think she was in. Episode 6, she may have been in, but probably didn't have too much to say. And then episode 7, she was there kind of as backup for Nightcrawler. Very little post coming back from ancient Egypt felt like Rogue had dealt with that, or was trying to deal with the fact that Gambit was dead. And I feel like the moment with her and Apocalypse that's referenced at the beginning of this episode is an interesting one, because it's her saying, I am still grieving Gambit, and I still love him, but he is dead. And we'll find, I guess, that affected Apocalypse in like a kind of profound way, and led to what happens in this season, which I think is cool. But I don't know, I just wish there was more of it. I wish we spent more time with it. I wish we got to see a Rogue that was happy. Not necessarily like happier than when she was with Gambit, but just like getting better. And because of the pace of the show, and I enjoy the pace of the show mostly, but when it does these big season-wide arcs, I do think sometimes you lose those moments, which makes Gambit returning feel less important. Now, Apocalypse returning, that's a different story, and I think that is cool, but it's all wrapped up in an episode that I feel like if it was in season 3, I would care about way more. Which is kind of why, even though I am on the we should resurrect Illyana team, I don't think we should do it immediately. I'm fine with not seeing her for all of season 3, and then maybe in season 4 there's some journey to hell where we go and get her. And hell, we can get Madeline prior to, and maybe Exodus if we want, I don't know. I guess then we're doing the Crow Show, which is an option. But anyway, so there's that element of the episode, the Rogue and Gambit stuff. I thought it was interesting, but again, I feel like it maybe moved a little too fast. On the other side of the episode, we had this X-Force and X-Men dynamic that I really liked. I like the idea that these two teams are sort of on the same mission, even though X-Corp or the X-Men or whatever you want to call them don't really seem like they're incredibly preoccupied with figuring out what happened to Apocalypse. But when Cable's mission of killing Apocalypse intersects with Rogue's desire to get Gambit back, that causes conflict. I think that's interesting. I like seeing these teams forced to work together. And then I like what they're teasing at the end of the episode, which is the idea that they're going to have to fight in episode 8. As far as the animation, I think this episode was cool. I will say, like, one of the things that I think stood out for me that I thought was fun was the design of Gambit. Originally, I know fans expect him to look different, especially because the Marvel Rivals skin that they put out last week, called Dead Man's Hand, the same name as this episode, looked more like the classic Gambit Horseman, the long hair, the blue, and the version from X-Men 97 was just a grayscale Gambit with red eyes. I think once you add the effects of his power, and specifically his cool scythe, I like it more. But speaking of Marvel Rivals, this episode starts with the scene that was teased in Marvel Rivals, which is Rogue at the Genosha Gala, but instead of dancing with Magneto, she's dancing with Gambit. Cool. Turns out it's also a big nightmare, but also like a psychic projection from Gambit. And then we get a scene that I absolutely love. Just the X-Men in X-Corp playing cards and joking to each other like the end of a He-Man episode. And I think just the idea of the X-Men having like a leisure activity is cute. It is kind of funny that this is the first time we've actually seen this team do anything at X-Corp, and specifically around this table that seems like it's like the meeting table. Obviously, they sat down there the first time they formed X-Corp, but that was only like an episode ago, and they immediately left to go to the Savage Land in the last episode. So I guess it's just funny because they bought this enormous building, and it's like, what's happening in this building? Are other people working here? Is it just you guys? Do you do anything, or did you get here and you realize like, oh, we don't really have like a job. You guys want to play cards until something happens? And we get this moment where Nightcrawler and Beast are facing each other. Apparently Nightcrawler's doing very well. He has what is called the Dead Man's Hand, which, hey Beast, maybe don't say that in front of Rogue. Cards are probably already a thing for her, but whatever. I do find this line a little confusing.
At least tell me how you broke my streak.
Life is not always a matter of holding good cards, but sometimes playing a poor hand well. Jack London.
Which, like, while that is true, and that's a quote, Nightcrawler specifically asked you, Beast, how did you beat me this time? And Beast said, oh, it's because real cards is playing a bad hand well, and it's like, you had the winning hand. If you had him fold, I think that would be like the right quote, but you had better cards than Kurt, and that's why you won. So, I don't know. But then there's an alarm because some plane is coming to X-Corp Island. And they're like, quick, Polaris, use your magnetism power to hold back the plane. But Polaris, I guess, doesn't like cards or was sleeping or is doing something else this episode because her and Bishop are both just not here for the entire episode. And I understand that not every character can be in every episode. It's just extra funny here because it seems like they would be able to solve most of the problems, considering the bad guys are flying big evil metal motorcycles and they're doing big purple energy blasts. The things that Polaris and Bishop are good at dealing with. But it turns out this is the X-Force plane. And we see that because Cable kind of awkwardly introduces himself, but Jubilee is like, no, we're cool. And like you'd expect, they're here because they need help with Apocalypse. I was surprised when they opened up the plane and they had Apocalypse's body in some sort of Bacta tank or something. Like, why are we keeping this thing fresh? Are we trying to heal him? Is this maybe stopping him from regenerating? I assume he's dead, so I don't know, like burn it or something. But I don't know, I mean, they had the big tube filled with green goo, so they gotta use it one of these days. But Jubilee reveals to Rogue that actually this is Gambit related, and she shows her that card that we saw at the end of last episode, which is like, hey, I thought he turned the cards into tarot cards, but I guess he left this one because he did want Rogue to find him, it seems like. But then you get the main conflict of the episode. X-Force wants to kill Apocalypse by way of probably killing Gambit, but X-Corp doesn't want to do that because they like Gambit. They want to figure out some other way. I think this is great. I kind of wish we'd spend a little more time with this idea. Not necessarily with the Gambit Apocalypse issue between those two teams, but just with the teams having an issue with each other. You get a little bit of that in the X-Force episode 2, where Cable's like, the X-Men aren't cool enough, and I'm gonna kill all the bad guys. But I guess I just wish we had more of the other side, which would be like Xavier saying like, X-Force is a big problem. They're making things difficult for us, and they're killing people, which we don't like. Cyclops and Jean being like, we're disappointed in Cable because he's our son and he's doing X-Force stuff. So that when this happens, it doesn't come out of nowhere, which it doesn't necessarily, but it kind of does. And that I would say is kind of the theme of this episode. Ideas I think are cool that kind of come out of nowhere. But the X-Men and X-Force team up and they're going to use Cerebra to try to find Gambit, which it makes sense why they would do that, but it kind of seems like Gambit would have just found them anyway. Because Gambit's whole plan involves getting Rogue, which is just say, I wish one character was like, hey, do we want to go find him? Because he hasn't done anything yet. Maybe he wants us. Who's the character that would do that? I don't know. Maybe Cyclops because he's like the best leader. Maybe even Rogue could come up with that idea. And it's clearly her just kind of saying like, I don't want to go kill my boyfriend. But she's trying to come up with other reasons because she doesn't want to say that. But I think it's cute. We have a little moment where Rogue and Nightcrawler celebrate that Gambit's alive. And this is why I think the pacing episode to episode, I understand why people are kind of annoyed by skipping over what should be big moments in the season. However, I think the pacing of the episodes themselves, like internally, is really good. And I like how much time this episode gives to characters just sitting down and talking about how they're feeling, talking about their plans. Like, it doesn't feel like this show is ever rushing during the show for me. It feels like maybe you could make the case it's rushing during the season, which is sometimes, I guess, a product of, I like the show, I wish there were more of it. And other times it does feel like it's like, oh, they probably should have done this a little bit more if they wanted this moment to matter. But it turns out Gambit is in his home of New Orleans, and he calls a meeting with Belladonna Bordeaux, the head of the Assassin's Guild, and Robert LeBeau, the head of the Thieves Guild. I do think it's funny, Belladonna comes with a couple guys from the Assassin's Guild, and I'm reminded, like, oh right, the Assassin's Guild, like, looks weird. They have, like, a uniform, and I like that. And I think it's funny in comparison because the Thieves Guild just looks like guys, like kind of ratty guys. And I get it, they're thieves. They want to kind of blend in and not look weird. But I'd say that's usually true of assassins as well. So I don't know. It's cute. And it turns out, no, Gambit invited them, and this is part of his plan. And he's scary and weird, and most importantly, he is going to be able to use the cards to corrupt people, turn them into his horsemen. And you're like, oh, so 4 of them. You have Belladonna, Robert, and then 2 others. Maybe 2 of the X-Men that we'll find. And then that got me thinking, wait a second, was Gambit the only horseman Apocalypse was trying to create? Because I believe we find out in the comics that Plague and Pestilence are still alive. Obviously, like, war is killed, but was Apocalypse's whole plan just, I need another death because I can't use Archangel and I don't really want to. Let's use this Gambit guy they all really like instead, and then I'll have my 4 horsemen. But instead, Deathbit takes 8 guys, because he's like, that's twice as good. And I guess that means Apocalypse just decided 4 was his number, but he could have picked more guys if he wanted. He probably should have. And then we get the first tease at the thing that I both most love and dislove about this episode. Kandara, the External, is back in the show. They need to get her for some reason. And it's not necessarily out of nowhere, because in the animated series, Kandara was part of the Thieves Guild. Like, she is essentially the god that they pray to. And we saw her in episodes 3 and 4, and Kang even said that she had a greater purpose and it was external, whatever that means. Like, I mean, I know what it means. It means that's what they call her. But, like, in universe, what does that mean? That is outside of, like, the story? I don't know. But then we get more talking, and I think it's pretty cute. Because, like, I love Jubilee relating to Rogue, the lesson she learned in episode 2 of this season. Like, that's good. That's perfect. And then Cyclops and Jean try to talk to Cable, which I think is fine, but is a little strange because of their relationship, like, what it actually is. Because they treat him like their son. And he technically is their son, but he also seems older than them. So, like, the idea of them calling him son and being like, son, we need to spend more time together. It's like, what do you think you're gonna do, Cyclops? You're gonna, like, take him out for his first beer? You're gonna give him the birds and the bees talk? I would love to see that. Because at this point, Cyclops, you might as well treat him like a brother or like an uncle or something. I don't know. But then Psylocke notices something telepathically, and before she's able to finish her sentence explaining what it is, Jean butts in and finishes it for her. And I'm like, come on, Jean. You're a better telepath than Psylocke, sure, but, like, can't give her this. She just wants to say a sentence. And it turns out that Deathbit's horsemen are here, and they are riding cool motorcycles. And now we're getting to the part of the design of Deathbit that I do like, which is that he's not just doing apocalypse stuff again. He's not, like, ancient Egypt themed, because he's not from ancient Egypt. He's from New Orleans in the 1990s, so he would have cool motorcycles. Even though motorcycles haven't really been a Gambit thing outside of Genosha, where they were a pretty big thing. So I guess that was important in Gambit. That's why they're using motorcycles. I don't know. I would always associate motorcycles more with Wolverine. But whatever, I love the visual. And Apocalypse made him ride horses, which was so much dumber. And they fight everybody. And the X-Men, for what is like the 5th time this season, have a plane disaster. This is technically X-Force's plane, but man, this has to be the highest ratio of episodes to planes destroyed in all of X-Men, and that's saying something. Like, for me, X-Men Apocalypse used to be the high bar because that was just one movie and 2 planes exploded. But with this, it's like every single episode a plane explodes. And, like, I don't want to give you any spoilers for next week's episode because I've seen that one too. At least 1 plane explodes. And I like this moment where all the flyers just jump out of the plane to have to fight in the air, which I guess in this group is Sunspot, Archangel, and Jean. This is the first scene where Polaris would be able to immediately immobilize all the bad guys and also keep the plane in the air when it starts going down. But again, her and Bishop were like on vacation or something and couldn't be bothered to join. I saw some people point out what seems like a little bit of an animation error, and I didn't notice this in the moment, but then when I saw it again, I'm like, oh yeah. But I also think technically it's probably not. It just makes the character like a little bit dumber. What happens is all the flyers in the plane jump out and start fighting all the motorcycle guys, including Jean. But then when we see Belladonna, Robert, and the rest of the guys get into the plane, Jean is also there. And it's like, oh, were these shots originally supposed to be switched? Yeah, probably. But technically, if you watch the first shot again, all Jean does is leave the plane and then go right back into the plane for some reason. And like Jean, it's like, did you think those guys with what you described as black holes where their hearts should be would be easy for you to just beat them all? Or you get out there and go, oh wait, these are like zombies or something. Let's go back inside. But then you get Gambit reuniting with Rogue. I like this a lot. First of all, I like the idea that they worked back into the show, which is the good guy's plan is for Rogue to touch Gambit and cure him, like she cured Archangel in the original animated series. And I like that with Deathbit, for whatever reason, that doesn't work. And he just puts her to sleep. And he takes Nightcrawler because Nightcrawler is cool, and also he's kind of Rogue's brother. Gambit and Nightcrawler don't have that kind of relationship, and I think that would be interesting if they had like a stepbrother kind of thing going on, because we do really get into Rogue and Nightcrawler being family in seasons 1 and 2, and I just kind of like it because I think it would be a nice change from the other family relationship where Rogue's adopted parents, Mystique and Destiny, just hate Gambit so much, and like hate him in a weird way, to the point where in the comics, Mystique just made up a persona and pretended to be that person to try to seduce Gambit so that she could prove to Rogue that Gambit wasn't good enough for her. But the reason we don't see the Kurt Gambit thing is outside them hugging on Genosha. Once Kurt joins the show, Gambit leaves. But I think it's cool that Gambit in this is not just evil Apocalypse Gambit. He's pretty much just regular Gambit, who's like a little bit meaner and is like fine with beating up his friends, but just to get Rogue back. And that makes sense because she means a lot to him. And also, he doesn't kill any X-Men in these moments. Yeah, like takes over their brains and like that's bad. But it's the kind of thing I feel like the X-Men deal with pretty regularly. And then the plane goes down. And for some reason, instead of just letting the plane crash and like maybe guiding it to safety, the X-Men try to land the plane with telepathy. And I'm like, we have 2 people that can fly, including Jean. Why doesn't she just pick everybody up and take them out of the plane and let the plane land? I don't know. Maybe it was gonna like hit a house or something. And then we get, for me, what is one of the most confusing moments of the episode. We see at the Institute Morph, Wolverine, Storm, and Forge watching this all on TV. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, where's Polaris and Bishop? I guess they're there. They're not there either. And Wolverine says,
Didn't get these back just to play gym coach while Jean and the others are blown out of the sky.
And then Storm says,
the school will be safe with Colossus. Right now, our family needs us, and X-Men fight for their own. Let's move.
And I'm like, hey, Storm, that's fair. But in episode 6, when the murder robot was going to kill Professor Xavier, you seemed cool with Forge's explanation of
Kelly's executive order. We get involved, we endanger the school's charter.
Also, Storm, it seems like this is going to be a way bigger deal if you guys intervene. Because if you guys intervened in the danger fight, it's like, you're not supposed to. But also, like, Genosha is not America, it doesn't seem like. Usually I think it's like off the coast of Madagascar. It's like its own place. New Orleans very much is in America, and jurisdiction is so important of Al Cooper. Like, this does seem like it's going to get them in some trouble. Also, looking back, the X-Men that show up don't really do anything. Storm has a moment where her and Jean work together to knock out all of Gambit's soldiers, but like, seems like Jean could have just done that by herself. Jubilee, Sunspot, like, they could have done this. So, like, A, last time you said you can't do something like this because this would endanger the Charter. B, doing this in America would endanger the Charter a lot more. And C, all this endangering the Charter doesn't really do anything because you don't really help. But then Rogue has dinner with Deathbit, and this is where we get the, okay, what are we doing part of this episode? And I really like this episode, don't get me wrong. In fact, we're about to see my favorite line in the episode, but this is the bit where I'm like, we couldn't have done this a little bit before, because we find out from Deathbit that not only did Apocalypse have a long-lost love, but it was in fact Kandara, the external, and the god that those guys worship. And you might be like, she's not a god, and it's like, well, they got a stained glass window over in church, she's something. But she tricked Apocalypse into falling in love with her, stole a bit of his soul, and then left. And I'm kind of like, hey, we saw Apocalypse a couple times this season. He didn't really seem to care about that. We also saw Kandara a couple times this season. She didn't bring it up. I would understand if the people that were working on season 2 were specifically only working with information from the animated series, and they had to rework this relationship between Apocalypse and Kandara. So like, sure, but this season started with 3 episodes that heavily featured Apocalypse. Gambit's monologue should be something closer to, back a long time ago, Apocalypse was in love. And he never talks about it, not even to himself when he's by himself, and she stole a part of him that seemed like something he would be trying to get, but he's never really brought up before, I guess because he's embarrassed. And like, I don't know, all you gotta do is just add a bit where Kandara is talking to Kang, but maybe she's like, oh, I like him, I respect this warrior. Like, he's really strong and cool and a mutant like I am, kind of, if externals are mutants, which they technically are. So we can see there was this relationship that was bubbling. Maybe Kandara even expected Apocalypse to help her take over, stop Kang, and then rule the part of Egypt that she's in. But then when Apocalypse makes a big black hole, she gets really mad and then wants to get revenge. I think the way the episode would explain it is that Apocalypse didn't really think about having a wife or girlfriend or anything until he talked to Rogue during episode 3. And she was like, you should be in love with someone. And he was like, who's the only other person that exists in this timeline? Oh, Kandara, sure. And that's fine. But then the idea I think we would have needed to seed at some point this season, maybe in episode 1, is have Apocalypse specifically be looking for this piece of his soul. Like, have that be something that Apocalypse wants and cannot get because it is important to him. Just so that this doesn't feel like it comes out of nowhere. But I guess what this reminds me of are those books from She Who Shall Not Be Named, where late in the game, out of nowhere, they're like, by the way, the bad guy has pieces of his soul just hidden, and we have to destroy them to get him. It's like, why does this seem to be the default thing that writers just attach to the bad guy? And I would say there are maybe 2 lines that I think are great in this episode. One is Apocalypse's reaction to his love, his only love he ever had in his whole life, leaving him after he gives them a piece of his power. And all he does after they leave is go, if you want me to take that seriously, just don't put that in there. Because I would be like, I guess he's mad about that. I don't want him to react the way I react when I go to the grocery store and realize because it's a Sunday they close an hour earlier or something. Seems like it should be a bigger deal, especially Apocalypse is very vocal. He's very animated when it comes to his emotions. But anyway, that's the plan. Deathbit is going to get married to Rogue, and he's going to give her this piece of Apocalypse's power so that he can live forever. And they have a weird, cute little wedding where, like in all good weddings, they summon one of their gods. Gambit stabs her, takes her little jewel, and gives it to Rogue. Also, Apocalypse is not known for having like a lot of love affairs. I remember when Kandara showed up for the first time in like this season, and a lot of people are like, oh, is that Genesis, Apocalypse's wife, who was introduced during the Krakoan era? And while it was like, no, this is another character from the show, I don't blame people for thinking that, because that is not what the character from the show looks like in the comics. I wouldn't say she looks that much more like Genesis, but that would have made sense. Also, I didn't realize, because as I said it, I was like, wait, isn't Genesis the name of the reincarnated version of Apocalypse from Uncanny X-Force? And it's like, yes, they're both named Genesis. But anyway, Gambit kills and dethrones God, but then before he can give Rogue the jewel, the X-Men land the X-Jet, and I'm sure the X-Jet is very confused about that. But they come out and they're like, Gambit, we're here to, I don't know, beat you up or something, or maybe exorcise the Apocalypse from you, or maybe just get Rogue back, something. And they immediately beat all but one of Gambit's guys. Unfortunately, the one that they don't beat is Nightcrawler, who last week got what I would say is my favorite action sequence of the season. Tied, I would say, with Jubilee's fight in episode 2. But then we do something I don't think I've ever seen them do in animation before. First person Nightcrawlering, where Nightcrawler beats up every single member of X-Force and X-Corp. And I'm like, wow, that's easier than I thought it was. I'll be honest, I kind of assumed the way Nightcrawler worked is it looked a lot like this from his perspective, except before he teleported to someone, he would like scan the battlefield really quickly and find them. So it'd be like, punch, 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 look around, there's Jean, teleport to Jean, punch, 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 look around, there's Angel, teleport to Angel, punch, punch, punch. But instead, it seems like he could just do that instinctively, like he has complete spatial awareness, which is cool, and it just goes to show you, like, teleporters are overpowered on this show. It's a very fun power to use, and I like that when they use it on X-Men 97, they go to pretty big lengths to show that it's special, because otherwise I do think Kurt could just beat up all these guys and it would look kind of cool. But instead it's like, what if we show him teleporting and you see him pulling someone through the other dimension? Or like last week, it's like, let's see him teleporting, but also he's having a sword fight. So that's a standout action moment of this episode. And then the professor fights Deathbit on the battlefield of the mind, which is also the Bayou, and they have a little psychic duel. And this brings up what is probably my favorite line in the episode, because it's so unnecessary, but so funny. And it's this.
As Jean once used the power of the Phoenix to bind the M'Krong crystal, I now bind you with the power of...
And it's like, okay, I guess. This isn't that much like it. And like, we fought Apocalypse before. Can we not relate this to a time we fought him? Or something you did? This comes so far out of nowhere that it seems like one of those things where, like, in the universe of the X-Men, there was money on him saying M'Krong crystal at one point. in like the mutant version of one of those gambling apps. And this is Professor X insider trading. It's like, that's an expensive big giant building that they play cards in sometimes. You can't afford that by not just scamming these stupid sites. Also, gambling is bad, don't do it, even though this episode shows them gambling in the beginning of the episode. And also, Gambit talks about nothing but cards. Everything is a card metaphor, which is like cute, but it must get old because there's not that many of them. Like before he brushes his teeth, does he put toothpaste on the toothbrush and go, all right, time to go all in? And Rogue's like, Jesus, it's like the 50th time today. Before he goes to sleep, he's just like, I fold. But I do think this fight looks cool. I like that Professor X uses this weird fencing, I don't know, conquistador costume or whatever this is. Specifically again, because it seems like it kind of comes out of nowhere. But like Professor X has used this before, I believe, in the animated series. Speaking of things that come out of nowhere, I didn't mention that during the big fight between, well, during the part where Nightcrawler beats up everybody, Morph turns into a character that upon first watch, I did not recognize at all. I had to look him up afterwards, and even then it was kind of tough to find him. That's apparently Earthquake, who was a member of the Shi'ar Imperial Guard, who we actually did see in the original animated series a couple of times. They are without a doubt the most obscure thing Morph is transformed into, because this season, what is it so far? Thor, Puck, Thing, Guardian, Silver Samurai, Cyclops, Spider-Man, Jean briefly, and then Mr. Fantastic, and I think that's it. I bet there's one I forgot. Tell me which one it is in the comments or on Twitter or whatever. But like compared to them, this guy is quite obscure. We'll say there's one character next week that Morph transforms into that like I recognize, but I would not be surprised if a lot of people don't recognize. But then the professor tries to save Deathbit, but it turns out Apocalypse is still inside of Deathbit and is kind of maybe controlling Deathbit. And he brings that lesson line back again, which I love.
After all this time, the teacher has still learned nothing.
And he briefly overpowers the professor, but then Rogue helps. I will point out, I didn't notice this in this season of the show, and I think this has been consistent. I think it's kind of weird that Gambit's coat has those sleeves, like you would see on like a sweatshirt. I don't know if this was what it was like on the original series. I feel like in the original series, it was just like a coat, like a regular sleeve. Specifically because it feels like it would be where he would hide some of his cards. Not that he needs to hide them, he's not a magician, but still, that's kind of what I was expecting. But we see a lot of his sleeve in this shot, and then I looked at my 97 action figure and it's like, yeah, it kind of has those too. It's hard to tell. Actually, wait a second. No, he doesn't. He just has regular sleeves like you would expect. I can't get off the thing without moving Wolverine. So like, is this the version that exists in Apocalypse's mind? Because I also assume he wasn't buried in this. I figured he was buried in the outfit he died in, which was his Genosha tuxedo outfit. See, I don't know, but it's got sweatshirt parts now. Cool. And then X-Force tries to kill Deathbit, but the regular X-Men, X-Corp, stops them, including Jubilee and Sunspot defecting. Then we see that Gambit is in critical condition, and in a moment that I'm assuming, like, every single person on Earth would expect from this show now. When you see Gambit on the monitor, he's given the designation XM266, and I read a lot of comics, but I cannot just call out when certain characters appeared. But I was like, I guess Gambit's first appearance is technically Uncanny X-Men 266, which it technically maybe is. It's his first cover appearance for sure. Also, he used to have this weird thong. That's an interesting look. And we find out that Gambit is in some sort of psychic coma thingy. Then we get a pre-credits teaser scene for next week, setting up the conflict of the episode, which I do really like. First of all, we learn that Cable has just been doing this whole thing out of a truck, and I guess he invested a lot in the plane, but he's basically got like what is essentially a mini U-Haul van filled with guns. And I'm like, wait, if they go anywhere, does Psylocke get to sit in the front seat? And does Angel have to sit in the back? And I'm like, nah, he probably just flies everywhere. But then X Factor shows up from episode 2, and I guess episode 6. And they don't have Polaris, so they added a new member to the team. But for whatever reason, we see their powers working, but we don't actually see them in this episode. But that's going to be Siren. We saw Siren in the promo material. Siren's also like an important member of the X Factor investigations team. So like that makes sense. And in my head, I'm like, oh, it's Siren because she's mad because Banshee died on Genosha or something. And it's like, not really. She's just there. Then we see the other members of the team, Havoc, Wolfsbane, Strong Guy, and Multiple Man. And I never pointed this out before, but I find this kind of annoying. There's a pretty specific color scheme to their outfits, yellow and blue, except for some reason Multiple Man's outfit has a kind of different blue. It's a little lighter, a little greener. I assume they made these outfits for them, so I don't know why Multiple Man's looks a little bit different, but it looks like that in the shot where they announce X Factor as well. In episode 6. Also, I've seen a lot of people in comments say, that's not Wolfsbane, that's Feral. I mean, like, in theory, it could be, except A, we've already seen this character talk, I believe, with a Scottish accent, and B, Like, Wolfsbane is on this team and looks a lot like Feral, but Feral is orange and has stripes in their hair, and like, this is Wolfsbane. We'll never know that because they never do anything important on this show. So like, they don't use any of their signature powers or have some sort of connection with Danny Moonstar, or they don't appear to have ever been a student at the Institute. But like, that is who that's supposed to be. And then Val Cooper comes in and is like, hey, help us kill Gambit 2. And this is the first time I noticed, because they show her whole body, she has Velcro shoes, which were a thing in the 90s. I like that she gets an outfit. I think it's cool. Hers is the right colors. Why doesn't Multiple Man's have the right colors? And that's the conflict for next week. We're doing X-Men Civil War. X-Factor and X-Force are going to go fight X-Corp. And I think that's fun. Like, here's the thing with this season. Like I'm sure a lot of you guys, knew this was the Apocalypse season, expected the big conflict of the season to be Apocalypse assembles a bunch of horsemen, dead characters like Gambit, but also like Magic, Banshee, whatever, because a lot of the marketing was also focusing on that. Like, we were seeing bits of the Colossus episode, so like a lot of these characters have people they lost that are important to them. Apocalypse tries to build a big evil pyramid, and our main characters have to fight the horsemen, a lot like the finale of X-Men Evolution or the X-Men Apocalypse movie. And while that is an option, I do think what's happening now makes a lot of sense. This feels very earned in terms of like, this is what X-Corp cares about, this is what X-Factor and X-Force care about, this is why they're kind of working together. The X-Men are just trying to save Gambit, and X-Force is just trying to kill Apocalypse, and there's this big issue where like Cable's questioning his destiny. I think that's all very clever. I do think some of the parts of the execution of this episode were a little clunky, specifically retconning Apocalypse to have had a girlfriend that he gave part of his soul to and has been trying to get back, or I guess hasn't been trying to get back. It's unclear in this whether Apocalypse secretly was making Gambit do all this stuff, or if Gambit kind of was in control. Because Gambit did want Rogue to be immortal, and like, it's not like Gambit got the thing from the external under the false pretense of like, I'm in love and I want to marry the woman I love, and the external like gave it to him, and then he was like, psych, and then he put it himself, and he's like, now I'm fully powered Apocalypse, because then you figure that'd be what Apocalypse would do. But in this case, it did seem like he just gave it to Rogue because he really wanted Rogue to be immortal also. Anyway, listen, I like this episode. I think it is fun. I think it sets up what is a cool finale and a cool idea for a finale, and gave us one of the most beautiful speeches about having love and losing it and the danger of being vulnerable, all in one little sound. And last thing, and listen to this bit because it is important, very important to me. I've been talking a while about the Nebula project that I filmed about a year ago, and I finally have an update. We're going to be releasing it as a short film. We're going to premiere it at the Holly Shorts Festival in August 21st of 2026. So less than a month. Then once we're done with all the festivals, whenever we are able to, we will premiere it on Nebula. This is I don't know exactly how long it is, over 20-minute long short film I wrote. YouTube friend Patrick Willems directed, and Dave and Nebula put together an incredible team, like cinematographers, actors, crew, and made a short film that really looks great. It is called Power Trip, and unless you are at one of the festivals where it screens, the first place to watch this short, again, that I wrote, will be on Nebula. Nebula is a subscription streaming platform that I and a bunch of other YouTubers created. I upload all my videos early and ad-free, including this one. This was here on Nebula first. And then, like my short film, there's all kinds of stuff you can only find on Nebula. Patrick has made other short films. Lindsay Ellis makes video essays exclusively for Nebula. If you've watched the channel, you've seen me plug many of them. The show Jet Lag premieres on Nebula. Tom Scott's England series premieres on Nebula. It is an incredible way to support creators, and we are in the home stretch, so you will very soon be able to see the short film that I wrote and Patrick directed on Nebula. And a year of Nebula is already a steal at $60 a year. That's just $5 a month. But if you go to go.nebula.tv/TheNandoCut, you can get a year of Nebula for just $30. That is $2.50 a month. It is an incredible deal. It's a great way to support me and a bunch of other creators who either you already love or you are about to love. Again, it is go.nebula.tv/TheNandoCut. So next week, episode 8, the finale. Until then, stay safe. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.